they'll come back to me, oh my gosh, yes, my bowel habits are better, but like my energy is through the roof. I have so much more energy. I'm feeling good. I feel much better. If people are eating a diet that's really rich in ultra processed foods, chances are they're not getting anywhere near their fiber intake that they need to just for their gut and their digestion to function optimally.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Today we are talking about all things gut health. We have Cassie Fenton on, who is a gut health specialist and IBS dietitian. We're going to be covering all things to how to have better digestion and the power of the gut-brain connection, which is one of the root causes of a lot of digestive issues. Whether you have chronic constipation or you just want things to be working a little better, today's episode is for you. If you enjoy the episode, let me know what you think. Let's start with Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine. He said that all disease starts in the gut. Could you please explain, as a gut health specialist, what did he mean by this? Are there any diseases that we might be surprised to find are actually a result of poor gut health?
Today we know that our gut is home to about 70 to 80% of the immune system. And that makes sense when you think about how much we're exposed to through the foods that we eat or what we drink, even pathogens and the environment that we're exposed to every day as well. And so our gut acts like a gatekeeper. It's constantly deciding what gets absorbed into the body, what gets filtered out. Some chronic diseases or even conditions like type 2 diabetes, inflammatory bowel disease, even things like eczema, depression, all have links to chronic low-grade inflammation. A big driver of inflammation is our gut health, which subsequently could be the health of our immune system as well. So whilst it's an oversimplification to say that all diseases start in the gut, there's some really strong evidence that gut health plays like a really foundational role in our health as a whole.
Could you do a bit more of a deep dive into what the gut microbiome is and why it's so important for our health?
The gut microbiome, is the community of trillions of bacteria, even things like fungi and other microbes that live in our intestines. Think of it as an internal ecosystem. These microbes help us digest food, support our immune system, regulate things like inflammation, and even produce chemicals that communicate with the brain. A healthy, diverse microbiome is linked to everything from, say, like better digestion, more stable mood and energy levels. And then on the flip side, when the microbiome is out of balance, it can contribute to digestive symptoms, so things like bloating, gas, constipation, or diarrhea, changes in your mood, some skin issues, and even like a weakening of the immune system as well.
Do you see that bloating and constipation and all these kind of gut issues are becoming more prevalent now in terms of the way that we live our lifestyles now? A lot more sedentary, ultra processed food, like these kind of factors.
I think there's a lot going on in modern society which can certainly have an impact on our gut health, and some of those things you mentioned. So with the food that we're putting into our body, of course, has a big impact on our gut health. Ultra processed foods, a lot of the times, like those types of foods are really low in fiber. Fiber is the fuel that feeds our gut microbes. And so when there's less fiber, it can have an impact. And then obviously that can lead to digestive problems. So we can think of things like constipation, particularly if we have a low fiber diet. In the way of bloating and gas, a big thing that I see a lot with my clients is we're often on the go, and subsequently when we're not eating regularly, so skipping meals, whether that's because there's not enough time in the day, so not fueling effectively in that sense, or when we do eat, we're eating really quickly. We're not taking time to sit down and eat our meals, chew food. That has a really big impact on our digestion and can really impact things like bloating and sometimes gas and indigestion and those sorts of things as well.
In terms of the gut-brain connection, can you explain how our gut has anything to do with our brain, mental health, mood?
There's just so much emerging evidence coming out around that connection between the gut and the brain. The gut and brain are in constant communication through what we call the gut-brain axis. This includes the vagus nerve. This sends signals from the brain to the gut to the brain, and then you've got the immune system, which of course is influenced by our gut bacteria and the health of our gut bacteria, and then neurotransmitters, which are chemical messages that help regulate things like your mood, sleep, focus, and there's about 90 to 95% of our serotonin, which is a chemical that helps regulate mood. This is produced in our gut, which is pretty cool. So when there's not as much good bacteria, it's a little bit out of balance, it can actually send stress signals to the brain, which may play a role in things like anxiety or depression, like any sorts of changes in mood. That doesn't mean that I guess gut health is the only factor in things like mental health, but it certainly is one piece of the puzzle that can often get overlooked.
Have you had any experiences with clients who have maybe come to you with gut issues, and then as that's sort of resolved, they've also noticed that their mood has improved, or maybe they have felt less anxious?
If I send someone off with, let's increase fiber, for example, and quite often it's not necessarily overhauling their entire diet. It could just be some small little tweaks, like having 2 kiwi fruit a day, making sure they're having enough water. And they'll come back to me, oh my gosh, yes, my bowel habits are better, but my energy is through the roof. I have so much more energy. I'm feeling good. I feel much better. And so it's always yes, it's working. But in saying that as well, there could be other people, say with irritable bowel syndrome, they might be dealing with pretty chronic constipation or diarrhea as well. And they may find it difficult. You could try a lot of different things, whether that's with relation to food specifically, and they might not see a change until that gut-brain connection is addressed. So it could be things like they're not really looking at. There could be lots of stress going on in their life that they haven't really focused on or really thought about. I know for me, stress was never something that I, originally thought was impacting my gut, but, the more I learned, the more I realized, hey, this has a huge impact. And so really interesting in the sense that some people actually do need to work through that gut-brain connection, and whether that's in the way of learning some tools to regulate the nervous system, so things like breath work, to really just bring their body out of what commonly we name the fight and flight mode, which is our sympathetic nervous system, bringing it back into the parasympathetic nervous system, so that rest and digest state, so that their body can actually, when they're eating food, can digest it properly and then help manage those symptoms that can often come with things like IBS.
Yeah, I know you work with a lot of people with IBS, and I feel like it's just becoming so common. What have you found has been the root cause? I mean, obviously everyone's going to have a different root cause, but what do you kind of find is sort of similar for people with IBS?
That gut-brain connection is a huge one, and quite often I will invite people that I'm working with to, I don't know if you've heard of it, but Nerva. So it's a gut hypnotherapy app that you can download onto your phone. There is a cost involved, but you pay a yearly subscription. But essentially, this sounds a little bit woo-woo, but there's so much fantastic evidence to support the work that Nerva does in way of basically rewiring that gut-brain connection to help people with IBS manage their symptoms. And for some people, it's not even food itself that's sort of impacting their IBS. It is this gut-brain connection piece. A lot of people will come to me and be like, oh, it's definitely going to be gluten or it's going to be dairy. But quite often it's that gut-brain piece. As well as with IBS, it is often a little bit more complicated than that. And whilst I don't actually need to put any of my clients on a fully low FODMAP diet, some I do, but it's not appropriate for everyone, or it's just not needed for everyone because they don't have a really severe, say, sensitivity to FODMAP food. A lot of people, like I was saying before, they're on the go, they're rushing from point A to point B. There's just no time to sit down, eat food slowly, digest, which all has such an impact on the gut. It is so individual, but I do see some common things coming up, particularly in the way of the gut-brain connection.
I feel like improving your gut health seems almost very inaccessible to people, because when we think, oh, I need to fix my gut health, it's I need to go and do FODMAP. And FODMAP, if anyone doesn't know, it's very restrictive. You have to eliminate a lot of foods. Oh, now I have to cut out gluten, or I have to cut out dairy. Are there small minor changes that actually have a huge difference that people might be able to start implementing?
100%, yes. If you're someone who, whether it's you've noticed a change in your bowel movements, for example, maybe you're feeling a little bit constipated, or you are noticing things like bloating, or even a little bit of gas, anything that sort of just doesn't, and I just want to normalize, particularly in the way of bloating, it's totally okay if you get a little bit bloated after meals every now and again. Our food has to go somewhere. There is some normalcy to bloating every now and again. When we think about bloating to the point where it's pretty chronic, you're either having it after every meal, you're bloated most of the day, or you can't get through the day without feeling really bloated, and that's happening pretty much every single day, then there's certainly something that like you might want to investigate. But in terms of people wanting to improve their gut health, things they can start doing or things they can try, I've spoken about it a little bit already, but I can't speak enough to just sitting down and mindful eating, right? Sitting down at your table and chewing your food really slowly, really thoroughly. Like digestion starts in the mouth. So by chewing your food really well, it's going to help your body break it down, which is going to help reduce bloating. And same with the way of like mindful eating, like really getting tuned to like the different flavors, the different textures of the food that you're having. Like try putting your fork down between bites and then try not to be on your phone. I mean, I'm guilty of this, but try not to be on your phone or being at your computer or watching TV or anything like that. Just be completely present with the meal that you're having. And I see a big change in people's digestive like health just with this change alone. Completely free. You just have to give yourself the time to sit down, chew your food, and just be really mindful. But it can have a huge, huge impact on your digestion. Another one is movement. And this doesn't mean going to the gym and doing like a really high intensity workout, like just a really gentle walk after like your meals. Even 10 minutes can just help support digestion, help your body break down the food that it's just eaten. Yeah, doesn't have to be high intensity, just something really gentle to help. Again, a quick walk outside doesn't cost you anything. Like, yes, it does take a little bit more time, so you may not be able to do it after every single meal, but even if you try to prioritize doing a 10-minute walk after lunch most days, like that can be really, really impactful. And I always speak highly of prioritizing good sleep because, poor sleep impacts everything, but it can impact your gut health. Obviously, it can impact things like your stress as well. So always trying to prioritize good sleep. I'm always happy to help people implement things, whether it's like a wind down routine or helping them get into a healthy sleep habit and things like that. And then drinking enough water. It's so underrated, but aiming for at least 2 liters a day. Hydration is going to help support your bowel regularity. It's going to help fiber do its job, right? So if we are increasing fiber in the diet, we also want to increase water so that you're not getting constipated from not having enough water and then blaming eating fiber, which is common. So there are a few that I would recommend that don't cost anything, that can be so impactful.
I'm just curious, like as you're talking, I was just thinking, do you ever find that clients feel better if they try and like break up their meals and do like kind of smaller portion but maybe more meals spread out, like rather than having like a big huge salad and then like a big breakfast, big lunch, big dinner, maybe halving each thing and like spreading that all out throughout the day, just like to reduce the load? Is that helpful?
Some people find that, small frequent meals, like you were saying, so you sort of have like a smaller breakfast, you have like a small mid-morning snack, smaller lunch, small afternoon snack, small dinner, still sort of balancing your day out that way. To sort of help. Like it can help with things if your appetite's particularly low, which can sometimes happen if you do experience, particularly at the start of someone's journey, if they're really bloated or an appetite's really low, or they just don't actually have regular eating pattern. I'll see a lot of people who may have skipped breakfast like for a long time, like, I don't have breakfast, I don't really eat till that 1 or 2 in the afternoon, then I always end up really bloated. So for those types of people, it can help to sort of start small to sort of help get that appetite back on track and then sort of help with digestion as well. But it is completely individual. Some people, if they eat more regularly, they find it trickier to digest. Some people find having larger breaks between meals to be helpful. So it does depend on the individual, but there's certainly no right or wrong way to do it.
I want to circle back to gluten, dairy, sugar. That always becomes like the forefront of the conversation when it comes to gut health. What is it about gluten or about dairy or like refined sugar that might have an impact on the gut? I mean, the way that I understand it now is about like gut lining and permeability, leaky gut. Could you kind of talk on that sort of thing, and how is it gluten inherently bad, or is it if you already have like a compromised gut lining, then everything that goes in is going to be causing inflammation?
It's so important to talk about this because gluten and dairy and even refined sugars do get a pretty bad rap. They're not inherently bad for everyone, but some people will feel better reducing or eliminating them. Someone has celiac disease or something like a fructan sensitivity. So when we're talking about FODMAPs before, there's different types of FODMAPs, fructan being one of those. And fructans are commonly found in things like gluten, so in bread, like wheat, those sorts of things. And it's quite often that people will blame gluten for symptoms, but very, very commonly it's a fructan sensitivity. So those sorts of things, like, yes, okay, if that's the picture that you're looking at. If you've got celiac disease, of course, like we wouldn't recommend eating gluten. And similarly, if you have a really severe fructose sensitivity, reducing gluten can help. Similarly, like with dairy, so like if you're lactose intolerant, of course, like there are things like digestive enzymes like lactase, which can help you break down the lactose in dairy products, which then don't give you the nasty side effects. But some people do choose to just limit lactose containing foods when we're thinking about those refined sugars. Don't want to demonize sugar, but for people with issues with maybe their blood sugars, so we're thinking about people with diabetes and even some people with, say, PCOS, like with insulin resistance and things like that, sugars in excess can play a big role there. What always matters most is someone's overall dietary pattern. So we're thinking things like fiber, diversity, minimally processed foods. If someone is considering eliminating something like gluten or dairy, that's always best done with like the guidance of a dietitian. And this is more so if you feel that things like gluten or dairy are upsetting you and you don't go see somebody about it, you just sort of blindly eliminate these foods. That could lead to things like nutritional gaps and obviously could affect someone's relationship with food. But also there could be something going on. You could have IBS or you could have IBD and you won't really know unless you go see a doctor and just rule that out. And then of course, if symptoms are still persisting, then you can of course get support from a dietitian to work out, if there is a food intolerance, like what's going on there. Even in the way of food intolerance, like they may not necessarily be forever. It could be that, like you were speaking to earlier, and that leaky gut or that gut permeability, which is like that gut lining. Things like gut permeability can increase someone's sensitivities to particular foods, or they may develop food intolerance. But in saying that, if you're working with somebody, like working with a dietitian, getting a little bit of education around the types of foods to eat to support good gut health and to help repair your gut lining, those sorts of foods that you may be feeling a little bit like sensitive to or a bit intolerant to, that doesn't have to be that way long term. There is strategies that can be put in place to help reverse those sorts of sensitivities, to help you be able to digest those foods in a way without getting symptoms.
Rather than going to this extreme of like having to cut out this whole food group, do you think it's better to focusing on the quality of the food, trying to opt for like the best quality gluten in terms of like sourdough bread, which is, fermented, which might be easy to digest? I mean, I think it's the Australia and the US, I'm not sure about the UK, but they spray glyphosate on the gluten crops, which I've heard some people talk about how people aren't necessarily reacting to the gluten, they're reacting to the glyphosate, like the pesticide that's being sprayed. So if people are buying foods that have gluten, are they better off to like opt for organic to avoid exposure to pesticides, which might be the trigger? I'm not sure. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I guess, look, it's so tricky, and I don't want anyone to think like, I can't afford to buy those organic foods, so does that mean like I'm not going to have a healthy gut? I guess want to reiterate or reassure those people that like that's not the case. Like you can certainly have like a healthy, happy gut without necessarily needing to buy organic foods. In the way of sensitivities to things like pesticides and the impact that may or may not have on gut health, like certainly is a consideration that it's good to see there is some emerging research about it, because the more research done on it, hopefully it will start to normalize like the way in which we are growing our food, and hopefully lead to a way where like basically everybody has access to that same high quality food. And saying that, sourdough, for example, if you're someone who can afford to spend that little bit more, excellent, because it is a great source of fiber, and there's also some other great benefits to it as well, because it is that fermented food that's got those prebiotics that help feed our gut bugs, which we love. But of course, like there are other foods that are rich in prebiotics as well. Things like yogurt, for example. There's things that you can do at home in terms of like when you do buy your veggies at the store or wherever you're getting them from, like washing them like as well as you can and storing them in a way that they can help preserve them so they can last a little bit longer, and help keep those nutrients in there.
For anyone listening who just want zero cost gut tips, like what would be your top 5 free of cost fix your gut tips?
Yeah, I always say like chewing your food slowly, thoroughly, sitting down to eat your meals, like that mindful eating picture, trying not to eat with your phone or other distractions. Massive, like doesn't cost you anything. Yes, it just takes like maybe an extra 10 minutes of your meal time to like really do it well, but the impact that can have on your digestion is just massive. I'll always push for aiming for 30 different plant foods a week, which I appreciate sounds like a lot, but when we think about different fruits and veggies, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs and spices, like all of these contribute to these 30 different plants a week. So whilst I know that's not necessarily free, but when you are sort of going grocery shopping or like doing your groceries for the week, sort of thinking about, okay, like how can I get some variety into my diet this week? And it doesn't have to be expensive either. Like you can get your frozen mixed veggies, have just as much nutrients as your fresh ones. So don't be afraid of using frozen veggies, frozen fruits. They're generally a little bit cheaper, but by getting like a mixed variety, you can be getting like 5 or 6 different plants just in like a bag of mixed fruit or mixed veggies. Things like legumes, red lentils, chickpeas, beans, like those sorts of things, you can get them canned, you can also get them dried, but they're usually pretty inexpensive and you can add them to different meals, like things like salads, curries, soups, stews, all of those things. And then even herbs and spices, a little bit goes a long way, but those mixed herbs, whether you can grab them from a community garden for free or you can just get the dried mixed herbs from the shops that last forever, they can be like, they add great flavor to your meals, but also they're different plants that you're then getting exposure to as well, which is great. A gentle walk, even if it is just after one meal a day, so going for a walk after lunch, just for 10 minutes, that can be a really good support for digestion, which again, doesn't cost you anything, but something nice that you can do for yourself after you've had your lunch, for example. And then sleep, when we're asleep, our bugs are sleeping too. They like that regularity of having a good night's sleep. So really important to prioritize that. Yeah, they're the main ones. And again, drinking enough water, like such a huge one to impact with our regularity and helping fiber do its job, which I think is so important. So they're a few of my favorites.
I love, they're great tips. When you were talking about sleep and, when we're asleep, our gut bugs are asleep, do you recommend people trying to finish dinner at least 2 hours before bed to improve their sleep quality?
Yeah, I usually do encourage a good little safety net for when we sort of stop eating. If you have dinner, giving yourself at least 60 minutes, 2 hours I think is pretty solid. If you have your main meal and then go to sleep in 2 hours, if you wanted to have something small, like a little bowl of yogurt or like a little ice cream, whatever it is that I'd probably still allow at least an hour before going to bed. It just sort of gives your body a chance to digest that food. If you have a really big meal and then try to go to sleep, chances are you probably won't be able to fall asleep. You'll probably just be laying there wide awake because your body's working hard to digest this big meal that it's just eaten. So by giving yourself that little buffer of an hour or two, just to help your body get that little kickstart, because your sleep quality is likely to be impacted. Even though you might be asleep, your body's still basically trying to digest this big meal that you've just eaten.
If we talk about ultra-processed foods, what impact do they have on the gut microbiome, on the balance of good bacteria to bad bacteria? Do the eating more ultra-processed foods create like an overpopulation of this bad bacteria, and what happens in that ecosystem?
First and foremost, with ultra-processed foods, when I think ultra-processed foods, I'm going to those foods that are generally really high in sugars, high in sodium, and generally have like next to no fiber. So that's probably the big key takeaway. If people are eating a diet that's really rich in ultra-processed foods, chances are they're not getting anywhere near their fiber intake that they need to just for their gut and their digestion to function optimally. So that's like a really, really big one. So there is like a lot of emerging evidence, particularly around the additives like emulsifiers, artificial sweeteners, and like thickeners and those sorts of things that are put into foods to improve texture, improve shelf life. These sorts of added ingredients may not always be really kind to our gut. If you're buying it every now and again, like it's probably just fine. But if you have a diet that's really rich in ultra-processed foods, it may have an impact. And yeah, you did share a study with me, which was from 2023. It shows that some of these additives may actually disrupt the gut microbiome. Basically reducing the beneficial bacteria and increasing those harmful ones that we don't want as many of. That imbalance is known as dysbiosis, which can make the gut lining more permeable, which you may have heard the term like leaky gut, when that gut lining becomes more permeable, meaning that sometimes those small unwanted particles can pass into the bloodstream, can trigger immune responses and inflammation, which can contribute to symptoms like fatigue, flare-ups with skin, like conditions like eczema, for example, shifts in your mood. It is a good reminder that, I guess we do want to focus on like whole or minimally processed foods, whilst some processed foods here and there, like, is probably okay for most people. When we think about those who may have a diet that's really high in ultra processed foods, they may feel the impact of those other additives like the artificial sweeteners and the thickeners and those sorts of things.
If someone comes to you and they say, I feel like I'm doing everything right, I'm eating lots of fiber, I'm drinking water, I'm moving, and their symptoms are still flaring up and nothing seems to be working for them, is there a common missing piece of the puzzle?
The big one that I see is that gut-brain connection, or that nervous system dysregulation. Quite often, clients will be like, yep, okay, so I'm eating lots of fiber and I'm moving my body, I'm drinking heaps of water, and I think sleep's pretty good. And then I'll try and dive a little bit deeper to sort of get an idea of, okay, like what's your day look like normally? And they'll be up super early and then they just go all day, constantly. Work's really stressful. There's no space for them to really do anything for themselves. Yes, of course, they're ticking the box. Yep, I'm eating okay. I'm doing regular movement. Yeah, I'm sleeping pretty well. But often there's that misalignment with, okay, like, you're ticking the boxes. You're doing the things that you think you need to be doing to support good gut health. And yes, they are great things to support good gut health. But that whole time they're just in this fight and flight mode. So their nervous system's dysregulated, their digestive system is offline. I think when we think about our fight and flight mode, like, go back millions of years ago, and that system was in place to save your life. You're running from a bear, you shift into that sympathetic state, and your body's like, yep, everything else goes offline that it just doesn't need, because it's like, who needs to worry about digestion right now? Because I'm trying to save my life. Like, let's just focus on the important things here. And nowadays, our body doesn't know the difference between running from a tiger and stressing out at work. So quite often we can be in this fight and flight mode for most of the day and not even realize it. So even though you're doing all these great things, like, your body's just offline, in the sense that, like, digestion's not online. All this great work you're doing, it's not going to be as impactful because this little piece of the puzzle is missing. And quite often that looks like, okay, maybe we need to take a step back from doing all of these great things and let's just focus on giving yourself 10 minutes a day to just sit, breathe, like, really just, and finding some tools for them to sort of help bring them back into that rest and digest state. That can be different for everyone. I think for a lot of people, I'll usually get them to start with, before they have their meal, to sit down for a few minutes before eating and take 3 to 5 really deep belly breaths, just to sort of get their body into more of a rest and digest state, so that at least then the food that they're eating is more likely to be digested that little bit more optimally. Eating on the go, or like eating in the car, still like trying to, you might be reading some really like stressful emails, or like things that really need your full attention, and you're sort of eating mindlessly whilst doing that, your body's just not going to be focused on digestion. So like, if there seems to be a misalignment, I'll always sort of check in there to see if there's nervous system dysregulation, constant fight-flight mode.
It's so interesting. I almost feel like our society, we have just like stress blindness. No, this definitely had been true for me, where I was like, I'm not stressed. Like if we can't see the stress, if we don't have something like an exam or a deadline, it's like, well, I mustn't be stressed because there's no external pressure, but everything is stored in the body, and our emotions, if they don't get processed, they just sit there. Also the hypnotherapy, the gut hypnotherapy thing, that sounds so cool.
Yeah.
Could you explain a bit about that and the mechanism behind why that can help digestion and relaxation?
I love talking about Nerva, and anyone who wants to look it up, so it's Nerva, Nerva. Yeah, it's an app you can download onto your phone, and it's all about rewiring that gut-brain connection through gut hypnotherapy. Over 60% of people will see an improvement in their symptoms, in their gut symptoms, before completing 6 weeks. So you might have to give it 4 weeks, but chances are you're going to see a pretty big improvement in symptoms just through practicing with Nerva alone. It takes around 15 minutes a day. I know for me, I choose to probably do something like that before sleep. It sort of adds to that little bit of a wind down routine, getting ready for sleep. There is a little bit of an educational piece. It sort of speaks about IBS and educates the person on that gut-brain connection a little bit more. And then you sort of go into a sort of meditation or gut hypnotherapy session. You do have to be consistent with it. So it's recommended that you do it every day for around 6 weeks. To get the full impact of that. Also encourage people to be doing it at least once a week like a 15-minute session as sort of a maintenance thing. Nowadays, IBS is being classified as a disorder of the gut-brain connection. Because of that miscommunication, it's going to affect digestive function, and that's going to lead to those symptoms that we often see with IBS, so constipation and diarrhea. Essentially, because the gut and brain are failing to communicate properly, the body can misinterpret normal digestive processes as pain or discomfort. It might not necessarily be the food that you're eating. It could just be that this heightened sensitivity that when your body goes through that digestive process, it triggers symptoms of IBS. The program was founded by a doctor who basically ran a clinical trial with Monash University and found that this approach that she'd taken with the hypnotherapy worked just as well as a low FODMAP diet in helping people live well with IBS. The hypnotherapy is trying to target the source of the problem, which is those oversensitive nerves in the gut. If you're someone with IBS who hasn't really explored that sort of gut-brain piece, I think would be an incredible tool. And
thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like that's going to be really helpful for a lot of people, because we always neglect our own stress levels and nervous system regulation because it seems unimportant, but it's obviously having such a huge impact on our digestion. I had some questions from some listeners.
Yeah, awesome.
So someone asked, how do antibiotics impact the gut microbiome, and how could you support your gut after having to take antibiotics?
Yeah, great. Just as like a forethought, antibiotics are life-saving, but they don't always just target the bad bacteria. They can also take out some of our good bacteria as well, which can reduce that diversity in the gut microbiome if you are on antibiotics, whether it's for a really long time or you have like regular bouts of having to take antibiotics if you have like a number of infections or things. So yeah, to support recovery after antibiotics, like I always will suggest just continuing to eat a really wide variety of plant foods. So, this is going to help feed the good gut bacteria that remain, and then also encourages like growth of those beneficial strains, including fermented foods. So things like yogurt, kefir, if it's tolerated. These contain live cultures, so they're really helpful in like feeding those good gut bacteria in your gut as well. It's most important, like just to give it time, like your microbiome can recover from antibiotic use, especially if supported through food and lifestyle. I get a lot of questions around probiotics with antibiotic use and whether that's beneficial. People think, oh, okay, I've just been on antibiotics, I've wiped out some good quality gut bacteria here, let's take some probiotics to like top it back up. And look, I'd probably say in that regard, save your money. There's not enough evidence to say like, yep, definitely take probiotics after antibiotic use and that's going to help restore your gut bacteria. Quite often, like there's even some evidence to suggest that that actually slows down the recovery of the good gut bacteria in your gut after antibiotic use. So I would probably just suggest eating a wide variety of plant foods, and particularly given you've probably just been unwell, that's why you're on antibiotics, you probably haven't been eating like a very diverse diet, always just focusing on, okay, like I'm starting to feel better now, I'm not on the antibiotics, I've recovered from whatever sickness or illness I had, let's get back on track with eating like a diet. Aiming for that 30 different plant foods every week is, I think, a really great starting point to help replenish anything that may have been, taken out with antibiotics.
So really taking like a food first approach rather than
Definitely.
jumping to supplements.
100%.
Sort of like similar, but also someone was asking about the pill, and does the pill have an impact on your gut microbiome? Is there a long-term risk?
There is some emerging research suggesting that long-term use of the contraceptive pill may have some effect on gut health. It is still an area that we're learning more about. Some studies have linked like the pill to changes in the gut microbiome and even increased sort of risks of like gut-related conditions like inflammatory bowel disease. But that's more so in people who are already genetically predisposed. But look, it doesn't mean that the pill causes those conditions directly, but don't want to scare anybody think that they're going to get IBD if they're on the pill. But what we do know, I guess, is that hormones, including those in contraceptives, can influence the gut. I guess if you are worried, you can still support your gut through, diet, like stress management, sleep, regular movement, all those things we've sort of spoken about today. And these can make a huge impact regardless of the medication that you're on. So I think, doing those things for yourself is going to help support gut health well and truly, when you're on the pill, when you're off the pill. Last
question from me is, so we've got a lot of really good habits that we can kind of like crowd out, with the movement, hydration. If we were to just say, all right, these are maybe 3 things to just be mindful of, too much of this in excess is something that I should be cautious of? What would you say?
A diet low in fibre is probably the first one that I would flag. This is more like with many modern diets, particularly the rise of highly processed convenience foods, they're generally low in fibre, like we spoke about, and even like restrictive trends, so things like the carnivore diet, which of course like boast about all these benefits, but there is literally no fibre in the carnivore diet. So basically,
I don't know how anyone does that.
makes me so mad. But our gut microbes rely on fibre, right? So, it's their main fuel source. So when fibre is lacking, beneficial bacteria struggle to thrive, and basically your gut diversity is going to drop. It's all going to have a huge impact on digestion. So that's probably my number one. Like if anybody is, sort of checking in or reflecting and being like, actually, yeah, probably maybe I don't get enough fibre. Like that's probably like the one thing that I'd be like, yeah, let's focus on that first and foremost, because that probably has one of the biggest impacts on our gut health. Unmanaged stress or a dysregulated nervous system is probably another huge disruptor to our gut health. It doesn't just impact our mind, it's going to affect our digestion, it's going to impact our mood, and even like the makeup of our gut microbiome itself. And when we're constantly in that fight and flight mode, the gut just isn't going to function properly. Like I was saying before, like digestion is offline, it is not interested. So yeah, this is why that nervous system support is so important and so key for that long-term good gut health. The third, probably biggest one that I see a lot, but that lack of movement or lack of exercise. And, regular physical activity is going to support healthy digestion. It's going to support gut motility and, support like good microbial diversity. Not saying you have to go out and like run marathons, just even daily walks can make a really big difference. But yeah, the impact of just more of like a sedentary lifestyle, what that can have on your gut health is really big as well. So I really think it's important to mention that it's not always food that's impacting our gut. And I think we can quite often get caught up in like, okay, I have to take like different supplements and greens powders and go on these really restrictive diets in order to have good gut health. But it really isn't that complicated. And I think it's so easy to get lost in all this misinformation online about what good gut health actually is, but quite often it does just come down to fibre and managing things like unresolved sort of stress or nervous system dysregulation, that gut-brain connection, and then also movement as well. Things that we probably already know, like, oh yeah, like I probably don't get enough movement. And actually, now that I think about it, when I move my body, like I feel great, Same thing, like when I eat well, I feel really good. And, when I'm managing my stress or when I'm feeling a bit more rested, regulated within my body, I feel really good. And those are all signs that your gut is thriving as well. It's not about being perfect. It's really about tuning in and finding things that are sustainable for you and your current lifestyle that support your gut. So yeah, I guess it can be so easily misconstrued that it has to be complicated, but honestly, like it doesn't need to be.
Well, I'll end things off there. Thank you so much, Cassie, for today. I really enjoyed our chat. I love the focus that it had on the gut-brain connection. That's something that a lot of people find really interesting. So if anyone wanted to work with you or follow your Instagram, where can they find you?
Firstly, thank you so much for having me, Georgie. I'm always happy to talk all things gut health and the gut microbiome. And for anyone who wants to get in touch, my Instagram handle is Gut Skin Dietitian. I'm on Instagram. You can send me a DM. You can book in a consult through link in my bio. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has around the gut if they have them.
Thank you so much, Cassie. Thank you everybody for listening, and we'll chat in the next episode. Bye.